A long time ago, when I first started DMing, I created a forest-based campaign, and the whole campaign was about spiders. Basically, large spiders, phase spiders, you name it, it was spiders galore. And I had a picture of a spider, and as we were entering the forest, they had their first encounter, and I threw a picture of a spider on the table. Two of my players had arachnophobia. Not kind of arachnophobia, like, arachnophobia. I had to change that encounter. So this is something I learned about. Sometimes knowing your players can be a good thing, but what does that really mean in D&D? Do I expect you to know all your phobias? Absolutely not. But there are some things that you should know about your players when crafting adventures for them in Dungeons & Dragons. So, let's talk about it. As a Dungeon Master, ask your players their likes and dislikes. Now, there's a lot of controversy on this. If your players don't know what they like, or you should only give them what they like. No. Having an idea of what your players like and dislike just helps you craft meaningful encounters. If your players are interested in a certain type of gameplay and you know that, you can give each player something to attach to. I'm not saying adjust your play style to match every single player, but it allows you to craft things better. If you know that one player is really big into combat, one player is really big into social role-playing, because one player loves creative usage of spells. I like to use spells outside of combat, but creatively, you can give them scenarios. You can come up with solutions that help them enjoy the game better. As a Dungeon Master, my biggest excitement, joy in Dungeon Mastering is watching my players have an amazing time. That makes me have an amazing time. And sometimes just knowing what they like or dislike helps me craft better encounters, better storylines, a better campaign. It doesn't mean I always stick to it, because there are things I want to do as well as the Dungeon Masters, and I should be able to do that. But if I'm doing things that my parties dislike, then, well, I'm creating it at odds at the table. So, food for thought. Know your players' likes and dislikes. As a Dungeon Master, know both your players' motivations and your characters' motivations. Yes, players and characters. You would think they match up, but they don't sometimes. If I have players that like big numbers, that like the power game, I can give those things to them. But their characters' motivations may be something different. Understanding both of them allow me to craft a better campaign. Knowing your players, is what I talked about in the previous video, is different than knowing your characters. The characters have motivations as well. And if you haven't asked your players what their characters' motivations are on a regular basis, not just at the beginning session, but throughout, offline. Hey, tell me about a little bit more about your character's motivations. You'll notice throughout the game, their motivations change. I once had a character which I absolutely loved. His motivation was basically to make a living. And then as he started combating the denizens of the dark, of goblins and orcs that were, basically evil and causing massive problems throughout the land, he started actually softening, realizing that these creatures were not just there to take over, they were trying to survive. And he developed a sympathy, so he wanted to figure a solution to where the war could stop. That was a character motivation. I never intended that to happen, but what the Dungeon Master was feeding me, because he was paying attention, slowly bit by bit changed my character, to where I actually started becoming a liaison between these warring factions. Completely changed the whole trajectory of the game, and what eventually been an amazing thing when we stopped the war between the goblins, orcs, and the humans. So paying attention to your player motivations and your character motivations are both important, because they will give you different information and allow you to craft hooks that your players will grab a hold of. As a Dungeon Master, you don't have to know the personalities of the people at your table, but it helps. Something that Dungeon Masters kind of are objectively tasked with is dealing with interpersonal conflict among a table. This is especially important in public games, right? If I'm playing a game where I don't know my players, learning my players, and then dealing with the conflict that arise is something that's an important stat to do. Skill, stat, whatever you want to call it. Now, if I'm playing with a group of friends, knowing my personalities and my players can also be important. I have watched Dungeon Masters and players ruin friendships because a Dungeon Master and player became at odds over something dumb. It's a game. This is a TTRPG, folks. We are playing a game at a table, and we should never ruin friendships over it, which means both players and Dungeon Master alike should understand one another, and we should talk about these things. But that has to do with personal interaction. If you as a DM and you as a player pay attention to the personalities around you and the players and dislikes and what they do or don't like, it will become you as a better communicator. It will help your communication skills to understand where someone else is coming from. Now, mind you, this is not something that should be a 1-minute segment of the video, but simply trying to understand where the party, the people, your dungeon master, the players are coming from will take you a long way, not just on the table, but in life. Food for thought on that one. As a DM, I talk about knowing your players. Now, when I say know your players' strengths and weaknesses, I'm not talking about their character. I'm talking about the player. My daughter, who's 12, has just started playing D&D. She doesn't know tactics. She doesn't know half the things her character can do. My brother, who's 10 years older than me, who's been playing 10 years longer than I have, well, I've been playing for 30 years. So that means he's been playing for 40. That tells you how old he is. They have different strengths. They have different weaknesses. My brother will miss some of the most mundane clues because he's been playing for so long. If I put something right in front of his face, he'll miss it. My daughter won't get the more complex clues. She won't understand the most basic of tactics. She won't see me setting things up. She won't know that she can, use the touch of spell of breath of, fire breath on her owl and have her owl fly and blow the fire down. My brother will do that all day long. When I know my player strengths, I also know how to tactically respond. If I'm an adversarial dungeon master to my daughter, she will die every time. My brother may be able to fight a little bit better. But if I'm not adversarial to my brother, then he will roleplay. He'll make mistakes because I'm not trying to kill him. When we understand as a dungeon master, especially as a veteran dungeon master, what my players' weaknesses and strengths are, I can play to them. I can also create encounters that allow them to shine in the things they like to do as a player. I love hitting my owl with Dragon's Breath and my Divination Wizard and using it as a dive bomber. So my brother loves to put encounters in front of me with lots of goblins where I mow through them. In almost every encounter, he'll have a batch of small guys it's my job to take out. I never realized he was doing this until years later when he pointed out, hey, I don't know if you noticed this, but I always allow you to use your favorite spell combination, which in turn meant I was using my resources. He could predict my using resources by focusing on my strengths and allowing me to shine with those strengths. If you attack your players' weaknesses, they feel defeated. If you attack your player's strengths, not your character's strengths, but your player's strengths, they feel empowered because they feel like they're doing a good job. Food for thought on that one. When you know your players, not your characters, that's important too, but your players, you can enhance the engagement. Meaning if I know what my players are naturally attracted to, I can put hooks in front of them that the players want to attach to. We always talk about character motivation, but we also have to talk about player motivation. If I have a bunch of murder hobos, give your players something to go kill. At the same time, when they come back to town, make it very clear that that is a bad idea. You can make murder hobos grab hooks if you pay attention to what they're hoboing about. Why are they killing things? They want loot. As a player, I want magic items. So start putting hooks of magic items, of powerful items in these different locations they can go get. Well, we want XP. Well, in my dungeon, in my game, XP is handled by killing arcane abominations. It gives you a boost because they literally are arcane energy that when you kill them, you absorb. That's something I made up to deal with the XP thing. When do you get XP and when do you don't? So just keep that in mind. Understanding character motivation is just as important as understanding player motivation because sometimes they don't line up. Players will tell you that their character wants one thing, but they naturally don't gravitate towards that. They're trying to be evolved, and when you put it in front of it, the player forgets that that's what their character was motivated towards. So remember, go for character motivation, but also don't forget about player motivation. As always, this was a handful of things to talk about knowing your players. Why to know your players? Your characters, yes, but your players also. The player is just as much a part of the game as the character is. Remember that. And as always, guys, thank you for helping us grow the channel. I hope to bring more of this to you. Like, subscribe, comment below. Tell us what you think about understanding your players. When has a Dungeon Master not understood you, and how did that come about? And Dungeon Masters, when did you understanding your players allow you for you to trade and create amazing campaigns? And as always, guys, we will see you next time.